Good evening, everybody. My name is Mark Warnick, and I am the South Bay Deputy to Supervisor Janice Hahn. So I'm happy to be asked to come out here. I got to tell you, I came out here a little bit early, and I got to take part in the farmers market, and what a treat that is for you, the residents. I'm also an elected official in the city of Lomita, and we don't have a farmers market, so this is definitely something I want to take back, and it's a great opportunity that all of you guys have. You may see some of your family portraits around. Just kidding. So here's the format, and I'll just go over it real quickly. Each candidate will have an opening statement. They'll have 90 seconds to introduce themselves and make their opening statements. The questions have been submitted ahead of time by El Segundo residents, as yourself, and have been consolidated by ESMOA staff. I will introduce the topic and read the questions aloud. Each candidate will have 60 seconds to answer the question. The closing statement at the end of the forum, candidates will have 2 minutes to make their final closing statement. We'll also be timing the debate. We'll keep track of the time, and when the time is up, there'll be a visual sign, which is the paddle here. What I've asked her to do, as when it's 50 seconds and you have 10 seconds left, she'll go over to the side. Well, why don't you, which is probably easier if you just, like that. Is that okay for you? That'll give you 10 seconds, so that way you'll know. And then when the sign is up, it'll be 60 seconds, and then we'll go on. The order of speakers will be determined by alphabetical order. Example, Barden will be first, and Pimentel will be last. And then it will be reversed in the closing statements. So, everybody ready to go?
Ready.
All right, here we go. We'll begin with Maria Barden with your opening statement.
Hello, I want to make sure this is on. Okay, first of all, good evening, and thank you everybody for coming here, and thank ESMOA for having me here, inviting me here, and letting me know to introduce myself. My name is Maria Barden. My husband and I have lived here for 24 years. We purchased our home here in 1994. We have 2 children, Ashley and Katrina. They went through the El Segundo Public School, and they are currently now in college. My background is in public relations and marketing and in management. In the past, I've worked for small businesses. Currently, I work for UCLA Health. I'm in the IT department. I've always been a member of, and my community involvement here has been in the PTA, the Run for Education, for over 10 years. I'm the president and homeowners board for our homeowners association for over 12 years. I've always been an active member for the Ed Foundation throughout my children's schooling here. I'm running for city council because I am committed to El Segundo's future. I know it makes a special place to live here and raise a family. I want to give back to the community, and I want other people to experience the lifestyle that we have had here. This El Segundo remains to be the most safest and friendliest and prosperous cities to live in. I truly appreciate El Segundo. One of my most important priorities is safety.
All right, thank you very much. 90 seconds goes quick.
Yes.
It goes quick. Lance?
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Lance Giroux. I have been a resident, a homeowner, and the vice president of sales of a local company here in El Segundo for the past 18 years. My wife and I have 2 children. I have a 12-year-old in middle school named Luke, and I have a 10-year-old in Center Street named Leah in 4th grade. I am currently the El Segundo Little League president. I've been so for 2 years, and I've been on that board for the past 5 years. Previously, I was also the president of the El Segundo Girls Softball Board, and on that board for 3 years, and I'm also a member of Kiwanis. I am deeply involved and invested in this town. I'm really seeking to preserve what it is that we cherish the most about El Segundo. Great schools, great emergency services, and a kind, caring, close-knit community. I'm really looking to secure and protect that in the future, and not just for me, but for everyone, from our seniors, to our children, to all of us that kind of fit in between, to local businesses as well as local employees. Thank you very much.
Next, we have Scott.
Hello, and thank you to Brian and Ava Sweeney for hosting tonight. Such a great venue and a great exhibit. My name is Scott Nicola. I was born in Hawthorne, California. Came to El Segundo originally in 1992 as a permit student at the middle school. Graduated here and went on to UCLA, where I achieved my bachelor's degree in sociology. Met my wife in 2009, got married, had kids starting in 2012. Scotty was born. Kimberly gave birth to him on Election Day, April 10th, 2012. Sullivan came to us 2 years later in 2014, so we are the proud parents of 2 young children here in town. My career started at the age of 16, my first job at Stuffed Pizza on Main Street. I stayed in the restaurant industry through college, as well as working for the Parks and Recreation Department, tutoring kids at the teen center. After graduation, I entered the real estate industry. In 2009, my wife, myself, and a couple business partners opened up Beachmex Restaurant here in El Segundo, and we've proudly owned and operated that since. My volunteer life started in 2006 when I joined the Kiwanis Club. I was eager to give back to this community that had given so much to me. I became the president of Kiwanis Club in 2016. I still wanted more. I got involved in the city in 2011 when I was appointed to the Environmental Committee, Planning Commission in 2012, and have proudly served for the last 5.5 years. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next we have Chris.
Hi there. Thank you as well to SMOA for hosting us. Thank you all very much for attending. Thank you to the fellow candidates. This has been a tremendously rigorous and challenging process with a month left to play. And I want to thank them for putting me in front of the naked babies for the picture, which blends in nicely with my head. I was born in Northern California at Castle Air Force Base. My father was in the military. I ended in Wichita, Kansas. I then joined the military as well. The Marine Corps brought me to Southern California, where I married my wife, Laura, who is from Redondo. And we have been here for about 7 years, well, 6 going on 7 years. We have 3 small children, and from them, as with most of you, you get involved typically in a time capsule of where your children are. So I was on the board of Eagles Nest, coach in soccer, softball, and baseball. I'm on the Little League board as well, active with Team Rubicon and other volunteer organizations, including the Camp Kesem for children whose parents are affected by cancer. But I put this to you a bit in that tonight you are evaluating candidates, and I would ask that we look at 2 things when we talk to candidates. There's 2 items. Do you like their ideas, and do you like their judgment? Right? When you look at ideas, it's are they fresh, are they new, are they actionable? And that's something that you look to us to implement when we get on board. The second thing is, do you trust our judgment? I'm a business consultant by training, I'm a Marine officer, and I've worked in public-private partnerships with Homeland Security. The judgment and the rationality and the synthesis of your ideas with our own is what makes a candidate effective.
All right, thank you very much. Okay, so we're going to start with our first question, and what I'll do is I'll start with Lance, and then we'll make our way around and then come back to Maria. Second question, we'll start with Scott, and then so on and so on. All right?
Make it a good one, easy one, please. Start out. Softball, please.
I'm starting from the top. And again, these are questions from you, the residents of El Segundo. This is previous involvement in El Segundo community. This is for all the candidates. A qualified candidate for city council must have an understanding of the issues facing our city and a record of civic involvement in our city. How many city elections have you voted in? And the second question is, how have you ever attended a city council meeting or any city commission or board to speak out about your opinion or how the city could better service its residents?
All right, that's a long question, so I'm going to take the first part I remember, which is voting in local elections. I do know that I was on Scott's list of high-propensity voters, so I think I've actually had a very consistent record on that. Second part was...
Have you ever attended a city council meeting
yes,
or
I
city
have
commission?
I've been to many city council meetings. I've actually spoken in front of city council on 4 different occasions, for whether it be for Little League or for some other actionable items in the city.
All right.
And the last part was?
The last part was, did you speak out about your opinion on, at a city, how the city could better service its residents?
Yes, actually the first time I ever was in front of city council was actually back in, I think it was 2013, at the Stop the Cuts kind of campaign that was going on right there. And I did get up and speak out, and really what I was calling for at that time was not necessarily on one side or the other, but to make sure that it was being done in a method that was good for both sides, and that it was played out in private instead of being played out in public.
All right, thank you very much. Scott?
Did the calculation here, 6 city elections. I did miss 2012 because I was at the hospital with my wife. Sorry about that. for all those who were elected that year. City experience, I've sat on the Planning Commission for the last 5.5 years. I've been party to many of the decisions on projects that we've seen around this town. One in particular that stuck out, In-N-Out Burger. When that question came up, I remember walking into that room that night and thinking, wow, this is a heavy one. These decisions matter. Us 5 people sitting here on this dais need to make a choice for what's best for this city. I've also spoken out publicly as a citizen of El Segundo, most recently with regards to taking care of the citizens on Candy Cane Lane and the traffic and the pedestrians and cars. And I think there was a successful outcome to that, and my time is up.
All right. Thank you very much. Chris?
I have a very cranky grandmother who used to tell us that if you didn't vote, you were just letting someone else tell you what to do. So I have voted in every election that I've been eligible since I was 18, whether it was Sedgwick County or here. I'm very happy about that. I'm not always happy about who I voted for when I was 20, but I have voted every time. And to that end, I'm a serial involver, whether it's basic civic volunteer organizations like manning a barricaded run for education where people get mad at you about not being able to leave their house, or any of the other pieces that we ask people to be invested in here in the city. I most recently spoke to City Council about cautioning with the dangers that come from lame duck rules that are passed in a lame duck session for city councils, and how those embitter voters and often lead to lawsuits.
Maria?
I voted on every national election. I have not voted on any city elections. I may have voted once, and I know as being a woman and a mother that I need to set the precedence and to do that, and to be forward-thinking, not thinking somebody else should do it. So I feel bad about that. I have been at town hall meetings, and I have expressed the residential sound program, because our home was supposed to be double pane windows, and apparently they ran out of funds. And but one of our locations, they already set the precedent because they were able to pay to have theirs done prior to anybody starting the construction on that. So it set a precedent, and then they said later on, they denied it, and they said that they ran out of funds. So that's when I would go to, on Main Street at their building there, and I'd go to City Hall to find out if anything can be done about that.
All right. Thank you. Okay, we're going to start with Scott. Since declaring your candidacy for City Council, can you please give us your thoughts from attending council meetings these last couple months, and the vibe in the council chamber and on the dais during meetings?
Great question, whoever turned it in. What I've learned in my time on the Planning Commission is that you don't have to agree with your fellow commissioners, or in a council setting, you do not always have to agree with your fellow council members, but you do need to listen to each other. My perception of the current council is there's a fracture, and they don't hear each other. A lot of times, council people that I may not agree with make really good points, and it's not being heard by the other council members because they can't see past their arguments. I'm a big believer that in this life, we will agree on 8 out of 10 things most of the time. I don't like to talk about the 2 things we don't agree on. I like to talk about the 8. I like to build a bond within those 8, build things together, work together, because when we come across those 2 things that we disagree on, we have respect for each other, we hear each other, and we can compromise. On many times, my fellow commissioner, Mr. Baldino, who's in the room, he and I have been at crosshairs, but yet we found a middle and moved on.
Thank you. Chris?
Yeah, in large part, I agree. I think that adversarial and collegial but direct discussion by a 5-person council is okay. I think that strong personalities are what you want out of your council people, because there are strong personalities in our body politic. If you have strong personalities disagreeing up there, but they're effectively and actively listening to their constituents, that's okay. Now, as an article of faith, we take it as voters that our commissioners and our council people are having robust and nuanced conversations before they get to the dais. But having people up there take direct and adversarial views is okay. I have found of late, to use the the terminology from the question, that there seems to be a lot more of the commonality and working to common purpose in the last few meetings than we may have seen at this time 6 months ago. So I think the ability to factor in commissioner opinions and to understand what one another is thinking up there as they make their opinions clear and their points has been direct, honest, and respectful. And I agree, and I really appreciate it.
All right, thank you very much. Maria?
I think what's really important is that we're here for the residents. So the issues that we got from the residents are what we're actually talking about. We have to really take them into consideration and what they feel is the most important thing and what they think is right. As council, there's so much passion in the city. I can't even believe it. And that's a good thing. If we're having to fight over what is right, it means that we really, really care. So making a right decision and doing brainstorming and making sure that before something gets into place, to make sure it's absolutely the right thing to do, then I think it's important to have those sessions and communication, and it might not always turn out best for one person, but we're doing this because it is the best for the city.
All right, thank you. Lance?
I echo a little bit what Scott and Chris came up with. Bottom line is that when you have 5 strong personalities up there with 5 ideas, things are going to happen. I think in general, though, that especially recently, I was at the last few meetings, and other than a few very hot-button topics that people are going to disagree on, I do believe there has been a lot more working together and getting into what are the best things for the residents and the best things for the particular issues. What I want to kind of actually point out, though, is I do believe, and I've learned this from walking around the neighborhoods and knocking on doors, there's a concern about transparency right now. And that's a transparency from the residents of not knowing exactly what these issues are. What are both sides of the issues? Why are things being decided? When were they being decided? I think that's something that needs to be addressed going forward. In order to act in the best interest of the residents, they also need to know what's going on both sides. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. We're going to switch topics, and there's a lot of questions here, and there's a lot of topics, so I want to make sure that we get through a lot of these topics. So if you submitted a question and it didn't get read, it's my fault. But I want to make sure that we at least hit a lot of the topics that are on here. All right, the next topic is maintenance of the plunge and construction of aquatic center. And I believe we're starting with Chris. What are your thoughts about a heavily undersourced school district being asked to pay up to $1.4 million for the plunge repairs and new aquatic center? And at any time, if you want me to repeat a question, please let me know.
I think there is a larger question there, obviously. At the end is what we're touching on about what's the relationship, what's the appropriate line between what the city finances and what the city's obligation is and what the school should. And I think that a piece of this speaks to where the school is in the process, the school board is in the process of looking at their capital improvements. So writ large, there is an issue of what will the school own and how much should the city invest besides crossing guards in those pieces. I think in specific, as we talk about the pool, it is something that is inordinately unpopular with a tremendous amount of voters. Right? But that pool is an important part of the city's future, and it is a done deal. I do think that it is entirely appropriate for the school to contribute, for the school board to contribute where its students will be making use of it. To the degree that they're being asked to contribute, I think is a bit extreme. $420,000 a year for part of the use agreement is extraordinarily high for that.
All right, thank you. Maria?
I think the city and the school board for these types of things in the plunge and fields and everything, they need to come together, because basically the reason why our homes here have such high value is because of our school system and because of the fields that we have and because of the new aquatic center and everything that's being built up around here. So we have to ensure that we work together on this. Now, I know Richard Lundquist is going to put a lot of money into that aquatic center, and I know the plunge has been completely neglected. And once that new aquatic center is up and running, I think the focus will be on the plunge. Now, whether the high school is going to take that back so they can use it, and then they'll have to put in the funds to maintain that, then maybe a bond will have to happen. But we really have to work together. You have to understand that the things that we put into the city adds value, and it actually increases the value of your homes in this city.
All right, thank you. Lance?
Yes, the aquatic center is a world-class facility. And the way I look at it, there's been a long time of that deal in the making. The deal has been done. The joint use agreements have been made. I think we need to respect what those agreements are. They've taken a long time to be done. That being said, I do believe that the schools and the city should be advocating on behalf of one another whenever possible. And that can be in anything, whether it's this aquatic center or in any business activities throughout the town. The city does not really exist without the schools do not really exist without the city. That being said, when it comes to the financial piece of this, I do believe that what's taken place and what has been agreed upon should be in play after that aquatic center is actually up and running and hopefully bringing in the amount of money that we think it's supposed to be bringing in. I think we should readdress what that agreement is and see if we can come up with a better option to help out both sides.
Thank you, Scott.
It's my understanding as part of the joint use agreement regarding the aquatic center, which is only one of the many joint use agreements the city has with the school district because we share many properties, is El Segundo Unified School District is being asked to contribute $400,000 towards equipment at the new facility. And the plunge is actually a separate agreement where there's a percentage that has been agreed to, but it's not to exceed $1 million. So the question is, do we think that's right? And do we think the city should be asking the school district for that money? I think that is a tightrope that can be walked here in this forum because we have not seen all of the numbers, we have not seen everything, and we are not having those discussions behind closed doors. I can tell you this, when I look at the city and I look at the school district, I understand we are not one and the same, but our children go to those schools. Our children are citizens of this town, and I think the city should do whatever it can to support the school district when it can. Thank you.
Thank you. Still sticking with the maintenance of the plunge and the construction of the aquatic center, I'm going to give you two questions here that you can roll into one answer if you'd like. Would you eliminate the 1.4 million payments, or how much would you reduce it if you were on the city council? Second question, lastly, do you look at the schools as a source of revenue to tap into or an institution that needs to be protected and enhanced at all costs? Want me to repeat those again?
Second one, yeah.
First question, would you eliminate the 1.4 million payment, or how much would you reduce it by if you were on the city council? And lastly, do you look at the schools as a source of revenue to tap into or an institution that needs to be protected and enhanced at all costs? Maria, we'll start with you.
Eliminate the 1.4 million? Absolutely not. Maybe we can negotiate to spread that out a little bit longer so we don't have to pay it off, however, I don't know what their payment plan is for that, but I think we can look at other ways, but absolutely not. Like I said before, this is an investment in our city. We can draw up revenue. We are going to fund and operate that aquatic center. And my kids were in swim club and team all over, so we need to draw up revenue. We just need to make sure that happens. Second question, schools revenue. No, we cannot touch that. It has to be protected at all costs. Weisburn District, the Da Vinci schools, it's going to be very competitive for our El Segundo schools. It's going to drive the bar up. Their academic scores are very, very high. So we need to make sure that we invest in our schools and put the money in there so we have our kids also get the same high scores.
Thank you. Lance?
Yeah, I would, I think I kind of answered this at the beginning. I would not be in favor of eliminating anything at this point in time simply because we don't have any actual facility right now. I'm concerned about the actual how we're going to manage and monetize that facility to make sure that it actually becomes a money-making proposition rather than a financial drain. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to see how everything works first. Get it up, get it running, see where you're at, and then reevaluate. At that point, yes, I think we should reevaluate if it's going well. Do we need the finances from the schools on that? I'm hoping at that point the answer is no, because if we do it right, it should be not only paying for itself, but it should be a source of revenue for the city. And I believe the second question was, should the schools be seen as a source of revenue? Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, no. I think when you look at the two entities, the school budget's about $30 million. The city's general fund is about $68 to $70 million. We have to work together and advocate on behalf of each other, and I think that's the important way to go forward.
Thank you. Scott?
First off, reducing the payment, I just want to be clear. This new aquatic center is designed to be a break-even proposition. It's not going to be a revenue source. It will break even at best. The new employee that was just hired to run it, Jeanette Gantz, a graduate, I believe, of 2006 from ES, from El Segundo Unified School District here. She ran a similar facility in Carlsbad, a 25-meter old pool and a 50-meter new facility. The new facility will be primarily used by the schools. In regards to reducing this payment, I do not believe the school district should have to pay $1 million towards fixing up the plunge in the future, because the plunge will be primarily used by the residents, not the students. Second part of the question was, do I see the school district as a source of income for the city? And the answer is no. Simply no. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris.
I think there's a bit of a split between the two. When it comes to the $1.4 million payment, if the pool is managed and managed well and managed with commercial sensibility, we can maximize that. There's nothing that says it has to be a break-even proposition. It can make money. If it makes money, I would recommend that we would treat the school district as sort of a first tranche creditor, where if the first person to get relief, if that becomes a money generator, becomes the school. You know, if we can bail the school out, if we can alleviate that $1.4 million payment, that's the first thing we should do if there's a degree of commercial viability. But that's something we have to see the pool up and running with a commercial management structure as opposed to a rec management structure if that's going to occur. Now, I also think there's a degree of a false opposition when it comes to, can the schools be a money generator? They're not commercial entities, so they're naturally not here for commerce. But we rent out things in the city all the time. Whether it's charging fees at Rec Park or renting out the football field at the high school, we do it all the time for monetary purposes. I don't necessarily see that that is a false or two items in opposition.
All right, thank you. Moving on to another topic. Topgolf's proposal for the El Segundo Lakes.
Yes.
And we're going to start,
Sorry.
we'll start with Lance, but here's the question.
You want to go first? Go ahead.
No.
No, you sure? All
The
right.
question is,
I'm waiting to hear her answer
What are
though
the-
right now. I got to be honest.
what are the candidates' positions on the El Segundo Lakes? Lance?
That's just a general overall El Segundo Lakes. Okay. Actually, with the El Segundo Lakes right now, I think we're in an excellent position. We are actually going to have a true RFP process played out over the next few months. All right? We're going to cast a big net. If anybody was at the meetings and listened to that, I think there's a subcommittee doing that right now, casting a big net, and be able to catch in there anyone who feels that they can turn that into something that can be a revenue generator or what is in the best interest of our city. So even though I will be honest in that when Topgolf came out, I thought it was a great idea. And if you read in the Herald today, I said the same thing, so I can't go back on that now. But I do believe that we actually have the best of both worlds at this point by actually having a true process playing itself out to choose what the best option is for that facility.
Thank you. Scott?
I think you're going to hear a lot of the same words echoed. The RFP process is being drafted. The task force is working on it. It will be put out. It will have a proper timeline, and it's going to cast a very wide net. Is it going to be limited to only golf? No. It's going to be opened up to any type of open space within that area at the lakes. I can tell you this, as a planning commissioner, I supported the Topgolf project. As a council member, I have to tell you that I'm excited to see what options come back to us, take in public testimony, and go through the process and then make a decision that's best suited for El Segundo and you, the citizens. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris.
Yeah. I am largely agnostic as to what that property looks like in the future, as long as it fulfills. There are two key guideposts that we look at as a city. You know, does it stay true to the values of what we want to be able to use at that facility, and can it generate us money? Right? If each one of our households stares down a $60,000 pension liability, then if we have something that can generate money, I think we need to use it that way. So if we can put some safeguards around it and make sure it supports the items that we want to be at that facility, I'm wholeheartedly in favor of being commercially viable.
All right. Thank you. Maria?
Okay. I think you know my stance, but I'm very excited about it. It's a team-building location for all your corporate businesses that they're looking for these type of places to go to. I think it'll generate revenue, but I also know that the current driving range is the only thing that's generating revenue right now. So I hate to take that away because I do listen to residents and they're a little concerned with that. What I'd like to see happen is to be able to retain that driving range and be able to find another location for Topgolf. But I am completely in favor of Topgolf.
Okay, thank you. Next topic, El Segundo and climate change. How can our cities best adapt and become more resilient to a changing climate and its ramifications while maintaining a healthy economic environment? I'll read that one more time. How can our city best adapt and become more resilient to a changing climate and its ramifications while maintaining a healthy economic environment? And we'll start with Scott.
That's you. I started the
You
last
started the last one?
Yeah.
Oh, boy.
one. Sorry, bud.
I was really excited thinking you were up. How can a city adapt to a changing climate? Global warming. We're talking about global warming. So, wow, it's a very interesting question. I'm not going to say I'm speechless because I'm not, but I will say this. We have an environmental committee. We have the chairperson of the environmental committee here tonight, and I can tell you this, that we as a city are constantly making improvements in our environmental stance and things that we are doing as a municipality to be greener, to look for more sustainable energies and things along those lines that will, in turn, work off of this changing climate. I think that's the best I can answer that question.
All right, thank you. Chris.
Thank you, Scott. No, I will put my work hat on and say that the risks of climate change when it comes to the microeconomies are indirect. So what I would caution to you is that if we see second-order effects from climate change, let's say Chevron decides to migrate to become an energy company and not an oil company, and they don't need to refine over here. What does our economy look like if that's vacant space? How do we diversify all of our business opportunities and economic zones so they're not reliant on that? So there's second-order and third-order effects that come with climate change that affect our economic viability, and a lot of it involves diversifying the tax base and how we let new companies move in. So it's not looking at rising tides, it's not looking like the amount of methane that we burn when we turn those propulsion turbines over there. It's just a matter of understanding what those effects are on a microeconomy from a diversifying economy.
All right, thank you. Maria?
I think we have to listen to science. You know, we can't keep our heads down in the ground. We have to know what could potentially happen in the future and be ready for it. Because, you know, our city could be very successful, but if we aren't prepared for things that could actually be mandated on our city, we won't be financially prepared for it. Our health is very important. We are next to Chevron, we're next to Hyperion, we're next to the airport. It's very important that our air quality is tested all the time. So whatever regulations that need to be done that we can prove that we're living in a healthy city needs to be done. And we need to look at those companies and get quotes for those companies. We have to know that we're living in the best area and most healthy environment possible.
All right, thank you. Lance?
I look at this question more as what can we do or what can we change that we're currently doing right now as a city to affect this? I think whenever we can look at our processes, our practices, to see what we can do to lessen the effect on the environment, even if it's going to comparatively cost a little bit more in the short term, we should be doing that. So we really need to kind of look at not necessarily what the short-term costs of these things are, but what the long-term effects of these things are. Often the long-term effects financially are actually in a much better situation. So without anything specific, I would say that I think in general we all would need to look at the way we are doing things and figure out what we can change in a responsible way to help our overall impact on the environment as a city.
All right, thank you very much. Moving right along. Next topic is construction of a desalination plant on the NRG property. And we're going to start with Chris this time. What are your feelings about the proposed construction of a desalination plant on the NRG property in El Segundo?
I am not a hydrologist, right? I want to be clear on that, so I don't want to speak too far out of my element. You know, my instinct on this, Every morning I commute over the LA River, and every time it rains, I see whatever the estimate is, between 800 and a billion gallons rush down that river and go directly out to sea. So my first blush is there a way to harness and make usable that fresh water that's already obviously fresh and store it for usage? That said, the advantage of desal is obviously that you can turn it on and turn it off. You don't have to worry about storage capacity. But there are inordinate costs that come with generating 44 million gallons of water. Some of that is sludge. Some of it is the fact that it's going to be turning in line with our last question about environmental impacts. It's going to be releasing a ton of methane into the atmosphere to get that 8 megawatts up that it takes to run that. Right? That's a lot of gas trapped. So that's something that my first blush would be, why can't we use the water that we're already getting in an effective way? But I would have to know a lot more about how we pipe that and store that to make a qualified answer.
All right, thank you. Maria?
Well, I know the EIR report will come out, I think, March 27th or the end of March. So that report will be public. So right now, without all that information, it's really hard to say. I know that San Diego has a desalination plant. I think we need to look at that, and we need to see, how that city views that plant. Is it doing what they expect it to do? We have to look for the future. What if we cannot? We get a drought. We have no water. We have to look at other water sources, and it makes totally sense to go to the ocean to remove the salt and get recycled water from there. I know it's a very expensive project, but I think we have to look at it, and I can't say any more until we get the full report.
Thank you. Lance?
I don't get it. I don't understand why we're even looking at this, to be quite honest with you. The environmental impact is enormous, from brine dumps into the sea to the amount of energy that it takes to run the facility. The amount of energy that it takes to run that $380 million facility is more than it takes for all 14,000 homes in Manhattan Beach. The carbon emissions are enormous. And my question is, why, when we haven't actually maximized the recyclable water efforts that we have in place already, are we looking at this? And I think when you want to know the answer, follow the money. $63 million over 17 years in studies. A $380 million facility. So you're going to tell me you're going to dump $450 million before you've pumped the first gallon of salt water into that facility. I don't think it's a very good option at this point for us at all. Thank you.
Thank you. Scott?
I have to navigate this question carefully because as a planning commissioner, it's very important that I do not take a position on an item that is going to come before us. So we have to look at the benefits and the negatives. And this, as Maria said, the environmental impact report will come out. It will be presented to us in an open forum, and we will have to take in public comment. What I can tell you is, yes, there are some huge negatives that jump out at me, but there are also some benefits. This is land that is not currently being used on the NRG site. This is land that could be taxed. This is land that a utility user tax could come from. So there are some benefits monetarily for the city, but there are also some negative aspects regarding the environmental impacts. What I can say is I look forward to seeing this come before us at the Planning Commission, and I look forward to the staff report.
Great, thank you very much. Next topic is residential east of Sepulveda. And we'll start with Maria on this one. The question is, due to the scope of project and impact on the city overall, please advise your stance on this project being voted on, not polled by the residents, versus a majority vote by a city council, which consists of 5 people and possibly 4 due to a potential conflict of interest for candidate Nickel. Due to the scope of project and impact on the city overall, please advise your stance on the project being voted on, not polled by the residents, versus a majority vote by the city council, which consists of 5 people and possibly 4 due to a potential conflict of interest for candidate Nickel. And then following that, I have 2 questions, 1 question for Scott, and then another question for all the candidates. So we'll start with that first question.
Currently, I'm not in favor of residents east of Sepulveda. I think we have so many other things that we have to address here. Our public safety is short. That has to be one. We can't have residents over there until we have the morale and the public staff, department here ensure that they have the right equipment and the tools and the training, and they're up to where they want to be. I can see maybe in the future, I know that we're talking about land that's over by the shopping center over there. Maybe that would be a good place, or maybe a military family, since we have a military base there. But my stance right now is I am not for residents east of Sepulveda.
Thank you very much. Lance?
Yes, I've actually had the same comments on this from the beginning. I have some serious concerns about rezoning east of Sepulveda for the following reasons. Number one, you're taking away potential commercial space that we need in order to generate revenues for the city. That's one. Number two, it is a strain on emergency services. More than likely, you would have to have a substation over there. But number three, and this will actually help answer the last part of that question, is it is the only issue that I can see that fundamentally changes the city of El Segundo. You eventually create, maybe not this generation, but maybe the next, 2 different cities in 2 different school districts and 1 city council. So do we want to get into that situation? And as for should this issue be brought up to vote to the residents, I am not opposed to that. I'm in favor of that because simply it is the only issue that has this kind of magnitude in front of us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Scott.
It should be a city vote made by the residents, not 5 council people, because it's not 5 council people that make that choice, it's 3. So I believe that the city should vote on that because I do agree with Lance. It would fundamentally change the city. I also do take the concept of tax revenue. This city, everything we enjoy is paid for by tax revenue. Every single inch of commercial space east of Sepulveda can be taxed potentially 4 times. You have property tax, business license tax, utility user tax, and in a hotel case, you have a transient occupancy tax. These tax revenues are crucial for life as we know it as residents here. So I am opposed to the idea of residential east of Sepulveda. Are you going to ask me the follow-up questions now or after Chris?
I'll wait.
Okay.
But you didn't want to hear my answer?
All right, Chris?
I think all of the rational discussion of services, costs, taxes, all of those argue against it, but I think fundamentally my instinct and what we almost uniformly hear from residents when we go door to door is the instinct to preserve El Segundo is that there should not be housing east of Sepulveda. We get too much of all the things that make this possible, from the reinforcement of the city boundaries being where they are now for where we live. And that would fundamentally be distorted and changed and morphed if we went east of Sepulveda with rezoning. How that vote takes place, I would prefer that it had never been brought up, to be honest, and was not even on the table. But I think if it requires a plebiscite, then we should do that. But referendums come with negatives as well. But I think that housing east of Sepulveda is a bad idea for the city.
All right, thank you. And this question is for you, Scott. And then after you answer it, we'll give everybody an opportunity to chime in if you want or answer it. If you're not, then we'll go to the next question. If the residential east of Sepulveda does not remain a city council vote, and the fact that you're a real estate agent with the majority of your transactions based in El Segundo, do you believe this presents a conflict of interest in your discussion and or voting on the rezoning of property for residential use?
Great question. First off, no, I do not see it as a conflict. Reason for that is many times on the Planning Commission, we are asked to vote on zoning changes. When it comes to a residential zone or an entire zone, such as east of Sepulveda, every single person would conflict out. Lance's office is east of Sepulveda. He would conflict out simply by the fact that he goes to work east of Sepulveda. So when we vote on things like the R1 code, me as a real estate agent, I'm not on the dais as an agent. I'm on the dais as a resident, and I'm voting on it, conflicted out or not. And we're not conflicted out because we all live in the R1 zone. So no, I do not see it as a conflict.
Okay. Anybody wanted to add anything on that? Just
No,
want
I
to give you a
just
fair
wanted-
amount of time.
Can I didn't finish my other sentence. I just want to say that I do believe it's up to the residents to determine if there should be residents east of Sepulveda, that their word needs to be heard.
Anything else? All right. We also have another question coming up for you, Maria, as well. So this is, again, questions from the public. All right, this is for all the candidates this time. Based on the information you've been able to attain so far, what is your position and what benefit does this bring the city? Is it a windfall for the developers who are pushing hard? But what about the citizens? And this just goes back to overall master plan. This actually goes back to residents on the other side over there. So if you guys want to chime in on that again, based on the information you've been able to attain so far, what is your position and what benefit does this bring to the city? And I think most of you have answered that.
Yes.
All right, so we'll move on to the next question.
Sure.
Good enough. Okay, Main Street, next topic. What is your position on changing Main Street to 2 lanes with angled parking and why? And there's a lot more questions on Main Street. Again, actually, I'm going to ask the second question as well. Again, what is your position on changing Main Street to 2 lanes with angled parking and why? The next question, as an alternative to reducing to 2 lanes, would you consider alternatives such as reducing the speed on Main Street between Pine and El Segundo Boulevard? Again, what is your position on changing Main Street to 2 lanes with angled parking and why? And as an alternative to reducing to 2 lanes, would you consider alternatives such as reducing the speed on Main Street between Pine and El Segundo Boulevard? And I believe we'll start with, I believe it's Lance. No, I believe it's Maria, I'm sorry.
Yes, I think something needs to be done. I know that it really, when you try and park and someone has to back up in parking, that whole backflow up is just ridiculous. Yes, to answer your question, yes. I know Manhattan Beach has angled parking, and I think that works better. To reduce the speed, I think that would be fine. I'm not too sure how well that's going to work, and if people really will do that. What I said before is what I'd like to see is maybe to have 2 lanes, but to forget about the parking, because when I counted the parking spots, there's very few parking spots, and I'd like to see maybe just a short portion of Main Street to be not closed off, but to remove the parking and have 2 lanes there, so the restaurants can have outdoor seating and it can promote more business here. Also with Farmers Market, I just know there's something better than what's out there right now. I can visualize it, but yes to angle parking, but I think there's even something better.
All right, thank you very much. Lance?
I'm definitely not an expert in the way this should be laid out. So I'm not going to, I would actually ask whether the engineers, the businesses themselves, is this something that would benefit the businesses in downtown? That's my first question, because I don't know overall whether it would be or not. If it's not a benefit to that or a benefit to East Parking, I don't know why I would do it, to be honest. So as far as the alternative of a reduction in speed, I think that's always a good idea. I think in general, the more traffic and more foot traffic we drive to downtown to inhabit our businesses, the more safe that we need to make it. And I don't think slowing cars down is going to have a negative effect on anything at all. So I do believe that would be a good idea.
All right, thank you. Scott?
I am for 2 lanes of traffic and angled parking on Main Street, especially between Pine and Main. We've seen a resurgence in the downtown zone, especially in, Pine and Grand. In the downtown zone in the 200 blocks. But when we saw the 100, 200 block resurge, what we saw was it dipped on the other area, 300 and 400 block. And when you meet with those downtown business owners, I happen to be a business owner just outside the downtown zone, so I'm invited to those meetings. All they ask for is more parking. We have a parking problem in El Segundo, and we should be very happy about it. And what I mean by that is it's a wonderful problem to have. If we didn't have a parking problem, we'd have a problem with empty businesses on Main Street. If we can add parking to the downtown corridor, it's only going to continue to help bolster the businesses in the downtown corridor. All the businesses are asking for it. I'm for it. 25 miles an hour is just fine.
All right, thank you. Chris?
Yeah, cities all around the country look and find creative ways to revitalize or invigorate their downtown districts. what shape that takes, we should outsource that to people who can give us the best perspective of what land use looks like and what parking looks like downtown. If that involves diagonal parking, and I suspect it may, it will involve better lighting, I suspect it may. But things like that to allow people to better enjoy downtown and drive more people to those businesses seems like a no-brainer to me. I don't think it's something that we should be insourcing to the creativity of people like me, because spoiler alert, I'm not that creative. But there's people who do this for a living that we can easily bring in to come up with an answer that works best and drives more business to those. And as far as pedestrian safety, and that's the root of slower traffic, I'm entirely in favor of it, because people walking across those streets are often subject to people who are driving cars with 3 small children yelling at them in the back when you get to the crosswalk. And that would be me.
All right, thank you very much. And still on Main Street, and I'm going to group 2 questions again, because some of you actually answered it, but I'm going to ask it again. Crossing the street on Main Street can be dangerous due to poor lighting, speeding, and distracted drivers, and our pedestrian traffic continues to increase. What ideas do you have to help improve the safety of our residents? And the other question is, how will you address the amount of hit and run, specifically car versus pedestrian, occurring in crosswalks on Main Street? Do you want me to say those again?
Sure.
Crossing the street on Main Street can be dangerous due to poor lighting, speeding, and distracted drivers, and our pedestrian traffic continues to increase. What ideas do you have to help improve the safety of our residents? The second question, how will you address the amount of hit and run, specifically car versus pedestrian, occurring in crosswalks on Main Street? And we'll start with Lance this time.
All right. I think we kind of mentioned a little bit about this in the last question, but I think anytime that you can take downtown, especially a situation like this, and create more lighting is number one. Be able to, the crosswalks we have, maybe all of them need to have a little bit more of the lighting. I think the little lighting pucks, I'm not sure what the exact name of it is there. I just think that we have ways to enhance some things we already do downtown, and I think some things that we can add to that on all the crosswalks and in the high traffic areas to be able to help this out. As far as hit and runs go, I think one's a product of the other. I think slowing down or having a lower speed limits is going to help that out, and just having more lighting and drawing more attention to actually the pedestrians and the crosswalks that we have.
All right, thank you. Scott?
We recently saw a capital improvement project go in on the crosswalk in between Main and Pine and Main and Grand. So now, I don't know if you guys saw the construction, it happened about a month ago. You press the button, the lights start flashing on the crosswalk. So that was something that our current council approved, and it was done, so thank you for that. In regards to how to make it safer to avoid hit and runs on Main Street, if you go down to 2 lanes of traffic, one in either direction with angled parking, simply by design, cars will slow down. They won't be able to pass. It's not as freely movement, the movement of traffic is not as free. Therefore, traffic will slow down. That's the idea of the angled parking. The business owners believe and have read studies that with angled parking, cars slow down and actually pay attention to what businesses are there. When you have 2 lanes of traffic going in both directions, cars are focused on one thing and one thing only, and that's speeding by to get home. Thank you.
Thank you. Chris?
Yeah, I would be in favor of continued capital investment in the flashing crosswalks. They make an enormous difference, both to the pedestrian and the driver for visibility. That's certainly not specific just to the downtown district. There's any number of crosswalks that could benefit from it, particularly where they're poorly lit. As you continue down by the high school by Main, there's a dubious crosswalk there that you always see a child in a dark sweatshirt crossing just after dusk. You put your life in your hands when you get there. As far as the hit and run, I'm far more concerned with how we stop the hitting than the running. Hit and run is a crime of drunk driving and underinsurance. The hitting issue will be solved by better capital investment in crosswalks. The insurance piece, we've got law enforcement here. They can track those guys down and ticket them appropriately.
All right. Maria?
Well, I think I had an excellent idea. However, some people told me they don't like it, and I appreciate that. But I would like to see if there's a way that we can maybe block off some of Main Street to just have it for pedestrian and utilize the back streets, because generally the businesses all have a backdoor entrance. Now, I know it's hard for seniors because they want to be dropped off right at Main Street so they can walk into the main entrance. But I'm I don't know if it's even plausible, but I envision something that is very pedestrian, very, very safe, people with strollers, and they're going to eat somewhere, and they can walk, and it's blocked off, and it's safe, and the cars can utilize maybe the back areas. I don't know if that's possible. If that's not possible, then like what I said, just 2 lanes and take away the parking, because people aren't going to look for parking and go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. It's going to generate them to either park on each side if we can open up more parking on the outer ends of the street. As far as crosswalks, I work in Westwood. They have this crosswalk lighting area with also a very loud sound.
Time's up, sorry. Thank you very much. But we do have a question that was for you, and I think you answered it. In your interview in the Herald, you make several recommendations and share ideas of what could be done on Main Street. One idea was changing Main Street to a walk street.
Mm-hmm.
So you did say that, so.
It would generate more businesses also.
All right. I think we've heard enough about Main Street. Let's move on. Budget. Managing to and balancing a budget are critical to cities, businesses, individuals, and families. Reviewing, modifying, and evaluation of budgets, service, and expenditures also critical. Many times there are numerous items at base levels that are overlooked, as they aren't big-ticket items. However, they can add up. How would you approach looking at all services offered in the city to residents and non-residents, determining if they're needed at the right price, value to the residents, and being collected? That's a long question. I'll just ask the question. How would you approach looking at all services offered in the city to the residents and non-residents, determining if they're needed at the right price, value to the residents, and being collected? Again, what's your overall view of the budget, I guess? And we'll start with Scott.
Didn't I start the last one with the 2 lanes on Main?
No,
You did.
you finish that one.
I love these. These are so exciting. So the question started with the budget, but then it ended with services offered to residents and non-residents. So are we talking the budget, or are we talking services offered to residents and non-residents?
I think the overall is the budget. How would you approach the budget as a city council member?
Should we forget about the second part of the question then?
Well, this is the question that's been asked. How would you approach looking at all services offered in the city to residents and non-residents, determining if they're needed at the right price, value to the residents, and being collected, which is part of the budget?
So it is part of the budget, so we'll focus on that specific part of the budget instead of looking at the budget as a whole. Just wanted to make sure.
Managing and balancing a budget. That was the first line. I'm sorry. I'm just
You don't
asking
have
the
to
question.
apologize.
Like that, you got the
You don't
10
have
more
to
seconds.
apologize, Right?
Yeah.
Instead of trying to answer a budget question in 1 minute, I'll focus simply on services offered for residents, non-residents. Recently, we saw fee structure change at the lakes regarding a resident bucket versus a non-resident bucket. We have things like they're talking in the aquatic center in regards to what it costs a resident to use the pool versus a non-resident. Currently, the rec park card costs $10. There's discussion of should that go up? For what the residents are offered in services through the Parks and Rec Department, should they pay more than $10? And for the non-residents that use our pool facility and other facilities, should they be charged a higher portion? I agree, yes. And this is our town. It's all of ours. The tax dollars that come into this town and the services that are provided, they're provided to us. If non-residents want to come in and enjoy our town, they should pay for it. Simple as that. Looking at the budget as a whole, since I have more time, going through it line by line and just using a level-head practical application to looking at it is how I will approach it. Out of time.
All right. Thank you very much. Chris.
Yeah. I think the budget requires a degree of intellectual honesty when you look at it. We budget for $20,000 in pet registration fees as revenue every year, which I suspect is not entirely accurate. So I think that a fresh look at what we are allocating for both debits and credits is important. But to that, I think that the heart of this question is value to residents, as in, if I were a resident, what would I pay for this service? And I would caution that that's a very dangerous way to do budgeting when it comes to municipal services. Because the value of those services, the price tag for those services is dependent upon the market in which you live. So a dog catcher in El Segundo is going to be more expensive than a dog catcher in Wichita. And looking at those things from ground speed zero, as in what's the value to residents, I don't think does that fairly. If we cut services or look to be a belt-tightening organization, then we will lose business revenue here. People will simply not come to a city. That is the nature of municipal finance. You've got to be able to spend money on services as the market will bear.
Thank you. Maria?
Well, I know we don't charge for parking like we do in other cities. I think we're the only city around here that doesn't charge for parking. And that's advantageous for people coming here to our city. They can stay longer. They don't have to worry about getting a parking ticket. We might not want to change that. But we have to decide what we want our services. If we want exceptional services, we might have to ask the residents to be a member of Parks and Rec. If we want to put a lot of money into Parks and Rec, and this is what the residents want, then they might charge a little bit more for membership. So we really have to determine what we want. What do we want, and what do we want to spend? That's where we have to start first. You know, do you want to have a very exclusive Parks and Rec, or just moderate where everybody can pay just a few dollars just to be a member? So it all stems with what the city wants, and that we need to hear from the residents.
Thank you. Lance?
The way I'm looking at this question is that we actually should be looking at how we protect and enhance our services, not on how we charge more for them or get rid of them. Okay, so the ways to do that is one of the things I've been talking about, and from the beginning when I started this, is that I think we need to look at revenue generation. How do we bring more in? How do we have more? At my point in my life right now, I'm going to be a senior in the not too distant future. I want more services at that time than I have now. I don't want to be paying more for those services than I am now because I'm going to be on a fixed income when I'm at that point. So I don't think we should be looking in the direction of our services for our residents as a way to look at trimming the budget. I think there are other places to look at before we do that. We need to take care of each other. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. We're going to go over to overall master plan. El Segundo is at a crossroads of determining its future and who we want to be when we grow up. The citizens embrace the culture and the reasons they moved here. People are generally slow to embrace change and avoid altogether when the information isn't available to understand what positive benefit that change will bring while retaining the culture we all value. Let me get to the question. Please share how you as a council member will help develop, drive an overall sustainable master plan for El Segundo and tie all the seemingly disparate projects, ideas, etc. Everybody understand that?
Can you repeat it, please?
Sure. I'm not going to go over the commentary, but I will say, please share, and this is master plan, please share how you as a council member will help develop, drive an overall sustainable master plan for El Segundo and tie all the seemingly disparate projects, ideas, etc. Master plan. Scott.
Chris.
Yeah, well,
Chris,
let's start with me.
You get the last one.
No, sorry, I'm sorry, Chris.
Was that just the last one?
You want to go again?
Scott, you want to?
Falling sword.
When it comes to laying out a master plan, particularly if we think it's going to last decades as our current one has, the first part is you decide what are the elements that make the city the city. What are the cultural elements that we're going to protect and not attach to things, but attach to those elements. And then as you look to develop around it, make sure that you are continually reinforcing and supporting those items. When we build a master plan, or the new one, it's going to have to involve changes. And I think a lot of us have looked at Smoky Hollows planning in particular, and some of those spots east of Sepulveda where we've decided we don't want to put residences, but we're going to have excess of 300, or whatever it is, 33 new acres come on board for commercial development now. We need to look at those and say, what's the best way to maximize those in a flexible and more nimble way than we're currently doing? When we talk about how to bring in disparate and different kinds of businesses, once we know what our cultural elements are, we need to make sure that we have a flexible plan that allows it to come in I've been endorsed by the LA County Business Federation because of a plan around that. Obviously, I can't fit that into 90 seconds.
Actually, 60 seconds. Maria.
Our master plan is to make sure that we have businesses here that our residents will support and value, because we want to keep the business here. So it's not just about getting any business here. It's about getting the business that we want to stay here, so we don't go outside other cities to give our business away. The master plan has to also include future planning and transportation. Transportation is huge. We want more people here, but they have to park and they have to get here. Maybe we can get some metro line or something that can either get from the east side over here, especially these kids. They want to go use the aquatic center. Why should they have to drive in their car or something, or cross Sepulveda? We have to look at a master plan and make it efficient. And that's what I'm saying.
Thank you. Lance?
Yeah, I think when you look over, there's phase one of the master plan is actually Smoky Hollow, and I think that is an area that we are all looking at right now. I was at the council meeting on Tuesday night, and this came up. It is an area of great potential for us, and we need to look at what is the best use of that space, because that's going to be a big piece of it going forward. Phase two is actually east side of Sepulveda, what we're all talking about right now. And the grant that the city is looking at right now to study this is important, because yes, there was a little thing in there about residential, but in the end, what you're trying to do is study high density office space. How can we actually set that up with an overall general plan that will be successful now and into the future? The types of businesses we've been relying on traditionally in this town are aerospace, commercial, and retail, all right? We have to start looking in the future at how to balance that out to ensure that the businesses that we have here are set up for the future and not just based on what we've done in the past. Thank you.
Thank you. Scott?
Master plan, culture, develop, drive. How would I develop and drive the master plan? One, it's understanding the master plan. It's understanding that this is a 20-year-old document, that within it contains many specific plans. The one Lance mentioned, Smoky Hollow specific plan, coming back before the Planning Commission, hopefully this month, and then on to council. They're looking to open up the zoning. They're looking to move on from a light manufacturing city of old, or specific plan of old, to something that's more opened up to mixed use, creative office, and the idea there is they will just open it up and see what happens. What I can tell you is, in my experience on the Planning Commission, you open up code and then you just look to see where the money goes, because the money will always win. You can try to set a structure and say, we want to see mixed use, we want to see this, we want to see that. If creative office is the way to make most money, that's what we're going to see. So it's understanding, when you write these codes, how it's actually going to be used.
All right, thank you. Next topic, the role of arts in El Segundo. And we'll start with Maria here. Do you believe that El Segundo should implement an arts plus cultural plan for the city? And the next question under this is, how would you support an arts and cultural policy? Once again, do you believe that El Segundo should implement an arts plus cultural plan for the city? And how would you support an arts plus cultural policy?
I don't think it really needs to be implemented. I think so many people love art. I mean, just to say that, do you think it should be implemented? Yes, my answer would be yes. To me, it's a no-brainer. I mean, art brings creativity, and I mean, there's so many studies on it that definitely, and look at the people that are drawn in from other cities just because of this place. I mean, it actually generates revenue, and it's good for our restaurants and everything. The artwork is amazing, and I hope that's continued. I'm sorry, the other question?
How would you support an arts plus cultural policy?
An arts plus cultural policy. Getting the residents involved with art, such a place like this, showing different types of art, bringing residents and bringing kids over here to generate that, and maybe they're able to express themselves using arts too, and can kind of showcase some of the things that they want to do, and the artwork that they have done here too might help.
All right, thank you. Lance?
Yes, actually, I think one of the things that I believe that we are deficient in the city is as an actual place for live entertainment. One of those things that was brought up at one of my meetings was a place for a playhouse, okay, to actually run production. So it's not just art, but actually adding on that piece of it as well. I thought it was a great idea because it is something that we are missing in the city here. As far as how to support the cultural policy, by support, I'm guessing we mean financially support in order to get it up there. So I think you have to really look at forming a committee of experts who actually knows how to actually plan this out. What should it look like? How do we attract attention to it? How is it able to sustain itself, and getting the community involved? Thank you.
Scott?
The role of the arts in El Segundo. The arts in El Segundo are strong, but they're not strong enough. Ed Foundation funds the arts at our school. When we talk about art programs and music programs, it all falls under the arts. From a city standpoint, it was brought to my attention that there's this concept out there, and Los Angeles actually supported this and put it into play, which part of development agreements, that there's a fee. There's an arts and culture fee that's applied. And if you were to support something like that and it was charged only on new developments, here's a way to immediately fundraise for the arts. We have an arts and culture committee here that is strong. They're almost at capacity. I know there's one vacant seat if anybody in the room is interested. Ava Sweeney is the chairperson, and they're looking for a budget. It's hard to take money out of the safety sector here in the city for arts, but I will tell you this, if we can add something like that and it makes sense as a development fee, I would be supportive of that.
Thank you. Chris?
Yeah, arts are classically the first victim of any budget cut. Right? They are first in the chopping line, especially when it comes to availability for public art. And across the country, in municipalities that redevelop their downtown districts, public art is a part of that. Now, whether it gets funded by an assessment fee or a new permit fee or a license fee, there's different ways to do it. And I think we can argue around the edges of what that should look like. But public art should not be something that just takes place in the high school auditorium. There are public spaces that we can make available for either permanent or rotating displays or performance places. The vehicle for funding that is something that is up for the council to decide, but I would be fully in favor of supporting a mechanism to allow that to happen.
All right. And Scott brought this up, but I think I'll ask this question. How do you feel about a development impact fee with proceeds going towards the arts? So you mentioned it, but I think it would be worthwhile to have you all answer that. How do you feel about a development impact fee with proceeds going towards the arts? And we'll start with Lance this time.
Thanks. I'm in favor of the arts. I'm a big fan of it. As far as an impact fee, though, I don't know what the effect of all that is. It's kind of, you're asking me a question in and of itself that it's difficult for me to answer. I would say, on the whole, since it's something that we need to fund, that yes, I think it's a smart thing. How much that fee is I think maybe more up for discussion.
All right. Thank you. Scott?
I have to answer it again.
If you want, you can add to it.
Let's just put this hat on. So commercial properties in town, residential properties in town, there is no transfer tax fee. Many cities have a transfer tax fee. It was proposed at one point about a decade ago to add a transfer tax on the sale of property east of Sepulveda, and it was shot down. Many coalitions shoot it down because it's not good in the real estate realm. But for us as residents, for us to look to other fees, especially when it pertains to the commercial transaction, not the residential transaction, I am supportive of anything that explores new means by which to raise funds.
Thank you very much. Chris?
Yeah. In general, I'm somewhat dubious of earmarked fees because they tend to become, whether they're easy targets to be looted for other things or they take on a life of themselves as money sitting on a corner that someone finds a way to plan around and access. So generally speaking, I would be in favor of a broader revenue stream, whether it's a transfer tax or some other revenue stream that's allowed to come from a general fund, so it can be budgeted for in specific allocations for specific purposes, because if there's a general earmark fee, that's just going to be a target for misuse, and eventually we're going to wonder why we raised all this money to begin with.
Maria?
I think it should be separate. My husband works in television, and I am sure there's a lot of supporters out there that would do donations or any type of sponsorship to make sure that the arts is around.
All right. We have time for one more question, and then we'll have the closing statements. So this last question is El Segundo and El Segundo Beach. This is a two-part question. How do you feel about the image of El Segundo driving along the coast? And the second one is how do you feel about turning El Segundo Beach into a dog beach? Scott, you lead with this question. Again, how do you feel about the image of El Segundo driving along the coast? And second, how do you feel about turning El Segundo Beach into a dog beach?
It's an interesting question because when I was on the Centennial Committee and we were discussing the Centennial logo, it came up, the first rendition of the logo had the smokestacks. They're not smokestacks, as Lily Craig corrected me, but lots of people identify El Segundo with Scattergood Power Plant. Scattergood is actually not part of El Segundo. So our image from the beach when you drive along Vista Del Mar, it's not very representative of who we are as a town. That said, do I think there's something that we can do there with property that we do not own? I don't know. Maybe with a development fee for the arts, we could promote more artwork along the fences there at Scattergood and Chevron to promote people to turn up the hill and come up and see our beautiful town, because this is a beautiful town. In regards to El Segundo Beach becoming a dog beach, I'm a proud dog owner. I've been told I'm not a dog lover, but I try. I don't know how to answer that question because I do not know enough about it to actually take a position.
All right. Chris?
This is a bit, everyone has their pet peeves. This is a bit of mine. We ask and invite people to come to us as the gateway commercial city to the South Bay, and we lead them up there by that horrible, decrepit, dilapidated Scattergood tank that's on the south side of Grand as you come up. Chevron has done a wonderful job with the Rosecrans facing and the Sepulveda facing properties with the berm. I would look to us to grab a hold of Janice Hahn, our county commissioner, and if she can put some leverage on Mike Bonin from the city. Those are absolute priority items for us because it does real damage to our city as a commercial center. It does actual damage to us as an inviting place to get businesses to come to. There is a material harm to having this thing look that terrible, just as much as there's a material harm to having Imperial Avenue be a pothole disaster. It's a pet peeve. I get animated. I apologize. And when it comes to dogs on the beach, I love dogs as much as the next person. I love my kids slightly more, and I want to be able to take them to the beach without worrying about how well someone else trains their dog. So,
All right. Maria?
So the first question, driving on beach.
Yeah, it's how do you feel about the image of El Segundo driving along the coast?
Okay, the image. Can we do something about it? Can we take something away? I know that the Scattergood, I know that's all going over to the other side of Grand, and eventually I don't know what's going to happen with that property, but is there any way that that can be maybe parking use and we can have some type of shuttle service into town and we can avoid having people, coming up with their cars and parking in El Segundo? Yeah, maybe we can have more trees or there's something that can block the view of that. I'm not privy to knowing that we could take any of that away. So if we can, I'd say absolutely. Is there a way to mask it? Absolutely. As far as dogs on the beach, I don't think we have human resources to be able to pick up after them if people won't do that. We have a dog park now, so I think there's a lot of cities that don't have that.
All right, thank you. Lance?
Yeah, I mean, actually, Chris and Scott kind of echo what I was thinking as far as, obviously they're not going to go away. It's part of what El Segundo is at this point in time, but is there a way to be able to create something a little bit nicer to look at down there, whether it be arts and images, or is there any way to advocate to kind of beautify the area a little bit? But in the general, there's not a heck of a lot you can do with it with something that's that big. It's really tough to pull the curtain over that. I think it's just part, unfortunately, of what we have and who we are. As far as a beach, El Segundo Beach becoming a dog beach, no. Kids, dogs, there's enough going on right now at that beach as it is. I think we're good with that right now. Thank you.
All right. I actually have 4 more pages of questions that I didn't get to. So, again, I apologize for those of you in the audience. that maybe submitted questions. I apologize, but we only have an hour and a half, and I want to make sure we get to the closing statement. So take a deep breath. You'll have 2 minutes each for your closing statement, and we'll go reverse alphabetical order. And so we'll start with Chris.
When I started this campaign and when I started getting involved and interested, I tried to distill out three things I wanted to work on, three things that I thought I could attach myself to, and threes are, by training, a common thing that we break things down into the military, so it's easy for me to remember. The first of the three things that I looked at were, what are our challenges, right? And what undergirds the biggest risks to us that we'll see in the next 4 years? The pension issue is inconceivably large. Right? At $134 million unfunded liability, that is a number that is very difficult to conceptualize, except when you think that it's either $60,000 or $80,000 per household, depending on the performance of CalPERS in a given week. That is a really difficult thing to wrap your brain around, right? We have a second challenge, and that is the affordability, right? The affordability to live here. There are macroeconomic forces that dictate that to us to a degree, right? We can nibble around the edges, but that is an insidious risk to our town that will change the way we live. It changes the makeup of who lives here. It changes the ages of people that you see at preschool. It locks us in our homes. It affects how we care for our seniors, and will have as big an impact on this city as putting houses east of Sepulveda would. So that is a large concern. Sooner or later, if we don't address it, it may be dictated to us by Sacramento. And the last of the three things that concerns me was the perception I got from talking to my neighbors and my friends about how they thought the city treated them. And that doesn't mean that people are treating each other badly. It means, is it nimble enough to adjust to a dynamic economy? Can we get things built, permitted? How long is our Smoky Hollow specific plan going to lay out there? The first plan I saw written up for it was 2012. And now we're thinking, make them out next month or next year. We're 6 years in thus far. So that's a crisis of confidence. Of those three things, the three things that militate against that, the three things we have in our favor, our ability to attract business with a business-friendly climate, our incredibly safe city provided by superior and superlative services, and then most importantly, the people who get involved and make our city an efficient and an attractive place to have your kids go to school, a place for you to go to work, and a place to live.
All right, thank you very much. Scott.
Thank you again for taking the time to personally hear all of us today. I think we are very lucky as a city to have 4 candidates willing to step up and serve this city. From the time I was 16 years old playing baseball from this town, it was impressed upon me that the name on my chest meant something. That when I took that field and when I stepped out of this town, I was not just representing myself, I was representing this town. This town is built on a spirit of volunteerism and a community participation. When I look around this room, I look at a bunch of faces that I have met through the years volunteering and being involved in this community. I am hardworking, I am experienced, and I am community oriented. What I truly believe helps me stand apart from this wonderful group of people that I sit here with is my experience. What I've learned through my civic volunteering is the public sector is different from the private sector. I too get frustrated by the public sector, but I understand that it is different. You cannot take a private mind into the public sector and expect to make changes immediately. The experience that I've learned in the past 5.5 years serving for you on the Planning Commission is invaluable. I cannot tell you how much I learned in just my first 2 years. My candidacy is rooted in a desire to serve you, the city that I love, and I promise every decision I make on city council, if given the opportunity, will have your interest first. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Lance.
In my opening statement, I mentioned that my main goal was to preserve what we cherish most about the city while seeking to enhance and secure our future. It's my hope that we all share the same goal. For my part, why me? Why should I be your representative? I have 28 years of business experience to varying degrees, from Fortune 500 company Procter & Gamble for 5 years, to working and living in foreign countries like China and Mexico in the footwear manufacturing industry, to family-owned entrepreneurial businesses over the past 20 years, of which I'm now involved with. In each of those stops, I have taken leadership and management positions, and I have learned firsthand how to succeed within all those varying environments. It was a tremendous education that I was fortunate enough to have in my professional career. Combining that with what I reviewed in the beginning about my civic involvement with different boards and being in leadership positions with them, being in front of city council 4 times advocating for my league, working with the planning commission, the Parks and Rec department, the school district, the superintendent. It got me very, very involved. And between the business side of it and the community side of it, I think I bring a very unique perspective and skill set to this position. As Scott mentioned, as our representative on council, as your representative on council, the job is to make sure that we are acting in your best interests or our best interests. So I'm actually going to make 2 promises to you tonight. The first one is I will never, ever abstain from a vote while I'm on council. That will never happen. The second thing is transparency. I will make sure that you understand what my decision was, how I got to that decision. You may not always agree with it, but you will know why I did that. Thank you very much for coming this evening. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Maria?
First of all, thank you, ESMOA, for hosting this event, and I really want to thank all the people that I went knocking on doors and the residents. You've given me a lot of information, and I really, really appreciate that. I know that some of the issues, I've heard you, the issues on Dune Street are completely different than the issues on Concord, and they're different than on Maryland. And you've given me a lot of room for thought, and I really appreciate that. Many of the issues are simple, and other ones take a little bit more time and perseverance. In my current position, I problem solve on a daily basis. I have a team of 20 physicians, managers, project managers, directors, and issues need to be resolved in a timely manner and the most efficient way. My experience in aerospace and my current knowledge in healthcare and IT gives me the perfect perspective and vision for where El Segundo needs to go in the future. This is a thriving community, and my experience in marketing is going to help with the businesses to promote more businesses here in El Segundo. One thing I wanted to say is safety is so important to me, as we've seen in other states, that you can be the most prosperous and most successful and business-friendly city, but it only takes one tragedy to ruin a city's reputation. So again, whatever we can do to promote safety in this town would be #1 with me. So in doing business here, I hope that you think of me. I humbly ask for your vote on April 10th, and thank you again for having me here.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, let's hear it for all 4 candidates. And once again, let's hear it for our host, ESMOA.